Hi, folks. Pastor CJ here, and I just wanted to take a minute to walk you down what we call our leadership pathway. And so you can take a look at this leadership pathway on our webpage here. You can open it up. You may have a printed copy that you can refer to. Either way, I'd like to walk you down our leadership pathway. If this is for anybody who is called to or is considering leadership at Grace of the Lord Church. And so when we talk about leaders, we're talking about anybody who has spiritual influence over others. And I mean more so than just the normal discipleship, one-on-one relational kind of stuff that all Christians are called to as we try to positively influence the world around us. I'm talking about the people who have been specifically called and should be empowered to invest in the spiritual formation of others in a plural sense, like teachers or ministry leaders of various types. And so wanted to walk you down our leadership pathway so that you kind of see what the next steps are. This is for everybody who's going to eventually lead in our church or ministry at any point. So the next steps are the same for everybody. Now, we take the leadership pathway very seriously, but we don't apply it legalistically. And so what I mean is there's some times where we might have to color outside the lines a little bit to make it look right, and that's okay. We may have to do some steps maybe a little bit out of order once in a while and customize this for the leader, but that's going to be the exception, and it's going to be an opportunity for us to really discern what God wants and make sure that we're following his lead and that our leadership pathway and our system here doesn't get in his way. But for the most part, this has been a very healthy process for us. We may have to take steps out of order, but we're not going to skip any steps. So everybody's going to do these things or go down this pathway, but maybe not in this order as we try to do it God's way instead of making our systems get in his way. So let's begin at the top as we take the first step down the leadership pathway. You could see the first step for anybody who's going to have influence in our church is we want to see them be an attender. Of course, they're going to need to be a regular attender of the church. We want to see people start to assimilate into the church culture and to really feel like this is their church family and be able to get along and participate and see that our values are the same and or at least as much as is humanly possible, and that there's a lot of synergy and that this is going to be their church home. This also shows us as we're trying to identify leaders that these are people who we can depend on and are reliable and are not going to be here today and gone tomorrow. Now, a lot of churches would put a number on this step to say, we want to see you attend for this many months before we'll let you do this kind of thing. And we don't have a number on that yet. We want to see somebody be a regular attender. Just an example of where we're not super legalistic, but we're serious about it. So we want to see people here more often than they're not for a while. I know that's general, and that's intentionally ambiguous because there's just different circumstances for everybody. But, we're not going to consider somebody a regular attender after a month or anything like that. Or if they're here once or twice a month for 6 months, that's not a regular attender. That's a regular visitor. But I think you see what I mean. We want somebody who's going to be actively involved in the fellowship of Grace of the Lord. So they're, probably attending at least one small group, and they're regularly attending the gathering, and they're participating actively in the life of the ministry. From there, people have the opportunity to serve, to be on a team, to be a team member, and so they may desire to serve. One does not have to be a member here to serve here. People can serve. We even have people who are lost, completely unsaved, serving sometimes. So we've got serving opportunities that you couldn't do it unless you're a saved believer in Jesus Christ. We have some other service opportunities where anybody can do it, and we love to see people pitching in and helping out, and we'll take all the help we can get. And so people can become a team member, and by serving alongside each other, it's a really great opportunity for us to get to know each other. And so I recommend people begin to serve as soon as they feel comfortable that this is the kind of church that they want to invest in. But you'll notice here at this next step on the leadership pathway, we have an off-road. And why I put that there is because, not everybody who goes down these steps is called or even desires to lead in the church. And so we have all these off-roads because we don't want anybody getting further down the pathway than they're called to be or it would be helpful for them to be. People can serve without becoming a leader, but people might not even want to be a leader. So this isn't a servant pathway. This isn't a membership pathway. We're describing the steps to leadership, which includes some of those things on it. But we create these off ramps so that people can get off wherever they're called. And there's no expectation of taking the next step. This is just our way of helping to empower people to take the next step if they are so called. So we've created a lot of off ramps. The next step, though, on the leadership pathway is membership. Again, this isn't an opportunity to try to create more members, but membership is the first real filter for us, because we don't want to have anybody leading here who's not a member here. Membership is not our way to try to grow our directory or try to sign more people up to join our club. People who say they're members here are saying that they have a lot of things in common with us. We share a lot of common core characteristics. We share a lot of common core values. And so that membership conversation is kind of a different conversation. But as for the leadership pathway part of it, this is a filter, because people who will be mature disciples in Christ, qualified to take the next step in the leadership pathway, should first be able to lead themselves, should first be able to invest in their own spiritual formation and be growing in their spiritual maturity as regarding their own investment. And then they're intentional about it without a whole lot of hand-holding. So they've kind of grown to the point where they will do whatever it takes to see themselves grow. And we don't want to see somebody influencing another spiritually who's not interested in their own spiritual development, of course, right? We don't want to see somebody who's got influence over another spiritually who has a shallow walk with Christ themselves. So membership becomes an opportunity for us to ensure that everybody who's got influence here is a mature disciple in Christ. For those who do desire membership with the church, we offer a couple of great opportunities for them to make an informed decision. We can have dinner together. You can get to know me. You can vet me a little bit. We can have some conversations just socially. You could take our Discover Belong membership class. It's not required for membership, but it gives you a lot of answers to most frequently asked questions. And then we have a great sermon series that we often recommend people listen to, because it really just unpacks our values in a deep way. And if we share those common values, then you know you're going to fit in great. But the next step on the leadership pathway is membership. And also, all members serve. As I said before, you don't have to be a member to serve, but if you are a member, you're going to be serving somewhere. And us serving together is going to be a great opportunity for me to get to know your spiritual gifts, get to know some ways that I can empower you to grow and to help you to discern your ministry calling ultimately. And so we're going to start to discover those things by serving together. And there's really no better way to grow in such a capacity than to do life and service together. And so that's an important ingredient in your leadership development. From there, now we can actually start to move down into the leadership portion of the pathway, because not every member is going to be a leader, but every leader here will be a member. One of the first things we like to see from people is that they go through our Grace Influencers training. The Grace Influencers training is not necessarily leadership development, but it gets all of our influencers on the same page as regards, how we do things around here. Because leaders may do things differently at the church down the road. We probably all share the common value of wanting to make disciples, but how we make disciples might be a little different than how they make disciples. So we kind of get everybody on the same page about, what's appropriate in counseling and what do we believe about the Bible and some of our key words and values, so that we're all kind of communicating with the same heart. And make sure that you've got a continuity in values among your leadership team, while this still allows for a diversity in leadership personalities and leadership characteristics, of course. And so the Grace Influencers training is something that we offer every spring and every fall. And so as you're walking down the pathway, you should be able to see some of those opportunities coming far enough that you can take the Grace Influencers training at your convenience. It's not exclusively offered to those who will be in the leadership position. We'll let anybody take it, but it is required of anybody who will lead in our church one day. Then we get into the various levels of leadership here at Grace of the Lord Church. On the way, you see what we call the leadership pipeline, which is an invitation-only leadership training with multiple levels. It does require a high level of investment on our part. So not everybody needs the pipeline, and not everybody wants the pipeline, but for those who both do need it and want it, we'll invite them into it, and they'll take, maybe one of the three levels or all three of the levels or whatever is appropriate. And it's a considerable investment that we're willing to make into the people who should go through the pipeline. It's a really awesome training opportunity that just absolute game changer. And it also opens up some doors to various resources that are just top shelf. So super good stuff. Not everybody needs it though. For example, not every Bible study teacher is going to need this, but especially high level leaders will need it. And a lot of people are going to want to take this. So we do create these invitations as opportunities allow. Then you get into the various levels of leadership. The first one you can see on the pathway is the level of team leader. So this is going to be somebody who is a leader of others. A team leader is going to be somebody like, say, for example, a grace group teacher, or really anybody who has influence over others spiritually. Maybe they lead a team. They're the head of this team or the head of that team. Maybe our transportation ministry team leader, or a teacher of a small group, or a teacher of a Sunday school. Anybody who's given spiritual influence as a representative of Grace of the Lord Church would be a team leader. This is actually the most common level of leadership, because the most common leader is the teacher, and so all of our teachers would be considered team leaders because they're leading everybody in their group spiritually. The next level of leadership would be an area leader. This would be a leader of leaders. An example, maybe the person who helps me coordinate all my grace groups, or all my Sunday schools, or another area of ministry could be all things childcare or all things hospitality, and so this area leader would help to provide care and oversight for team leaders. Then we have ministry leaders. These are going to be leaders of an entire department or an entire ministry field. So, for example, that could be finances, or all things bookkeeping, or all things first impressions, or all things outreach, or all things discipleship. This entire area of ministry. As anybody responsible for a whole ministry field, maybe they will have multiple area leaders or team leaders that they are caring for and serving. Now, one little disclaimer, in a small little church like ours, there's a pretty fine line between ministry leader and area leader. But in a larger church, we're thinking with the end in mind, and in a larger church, there'll be a bigger difference between the ministry leader and the area leader. So for us, for now, the difference is pretty insignificant. And then the next area of leadership on the leadership pathway would be executive leader. So this would be a leader of an entire ministry, or maybe multiple ministries. So say, for example, somebody who is a prison chaplain, or a deacon, or a board member, or something like that. Anybody who's got influence over an entire category of ministry. And then lastly, we have the senior leaders. That's going to be leaders of the entire church. So that's going to be, pastors who are, with a title, not pastors in training, but, executive pastor, senior pastor, associate pastor, youth pastor, this kind of thing. These are going to be people who have responsibility for the overall vision of the entire church. Now, here's an element that's kind of built into the back end of the pathway that you don't see on the pathway. We have an element of care built in on the pathway that expects the higher level leaders to provide care for those that they are leading, and to be the most influential care provider in their lives. So, for example, your senior leaders are going to be directly responsible for caring for your executive leaders. Your area leaders are directly responsible for caring for the team leaders. The team leaders are directly responsible for caring for the team members. And so there's this trickle down of care that takes place, and care is a big deal in the leadership pathway. Also, leadership development works the same way in our leadership pathway. All the people who are leading here are expected to be developed and invested in by another leader here. And, they can do whatever outside of here as well. We encourage them to get leadership resources everywhere and have mentors from anywhere. But we want to see there to be leadership development happening from within our ranks for everybody in our ranks. And so all of our executive leaders will be being developed and invested in by our senior leaders, and they will be investing in ministry leaders or area leaders under them. And so everybody's investing in and being invested in by other leaders within the church. So we have opportunities for leadership development and resources for care and development for every level of leadership. And so I hope that helps to clarify what we mean when we talk about our leadership pathway. Hope it answers some of your questions. We'd love to see you discern what your next steps are on the leadership pathway. We'd love to empower you to identify your calling and to resource you for success in your ministry area. We look forward to walking with you down the leadership pathway.